appreciate everybody coming out on one of the first beautiful spring days that we have. We've spent most of the day today, Tim Hudak and I, touring around town, in and out of restaurants, and chatting with local residents and meeting with some of our Haldimand County municipal leaders. Tim has a few words for us. I think what I'd like to do is just turn it over to our leader of the official opposition, BC, Tim Hudak. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. I'll step forward a little bit. Well, Toby, thanks very much for the kind words introduction, and folks, thanks for taking the time to join us here to members of the media. I've got a few words I'll say about my day here with Toby, then glad to take any questions that you may have. Let me first say it's always good to be back in Caledonia. I come from a neighboring riding, and while I don't pretend to know everything about Caledonia and rely on my colleague Toby for a lot of advice, I do know that Caledonia has a history as a community that was close-knit. Whether you're a native or non-native, played in the same hockey teams, went to scouts together and school together. But the 6 years now of occupation has torn the community asunder. It is time to move on and to move forward. And I want to hear from Premier McGuinty what I believe, and that is that the rule of law has been suspended in Caledonia, and the situation has gone on for far too long. You know, Toby and I are standing today in the Canadian Tire parking lot where a CH cameraman was brutally assaulted years ago, where a seniors couple was similarly assaulted. You know, as Canadians, I think we all believe in equal treatment of the law, that we should all be treated equally no matter what our background. And if we don't have the rule of law in Canada, we don't have anything at the end of the day. This is a grave miscarriage of justice that has gone on far too long, and it is just plain wrong. You know, Toby and I talked to residents today that have been directly impacted by the problems here in Caledonia, and they say enough is enough. So this is what we need to see. We need to see Premier McGuinty say what I just said, that this is wrong. There has not been an application of justice in the Caledonia area, and it needs to come to an end. And we need to see leadership from the Premier to resolve this issue and to move forward. You know, I didn't have the honor of winning the last election. I did gain 16 new members. I'm not the Premier's chair. But if I were, I would make sure that our frontline police officers know that they have a Premier who believes that we need to enforce the law in the province of Ontario. It stands behind our frontline officers in carrying out those duties. That a clear Canadian principle, and that we should all be treated equally under the law. And behavior that runs against the law shouldn't be rewarded. It shouldn't be tolerated. We need to get a point of finality, peace and stability in Caledonia, which will benefit everybody in the area by attracting more jobs and helping families raise their children in this great country of Canada.
Why did you have to come here to say that? Why here and why now?
Oh, I've said this in the House, I've said this in debates across the province, and as I've traveled as an MPP or the neighboring riding that I come from, Niagara West Glanbrook, I've said the same thing. But Toby wanted to have a chance to bring me back to Caledonia to talk directly to some folks whose backyards I sat in not too long ago, talk about the situation they went through.
You're in a very sensitive area right here. This was where a lot of the conflict happened. You came right to ground zero pretty well. Why is that?
I think it's time we had some straight talk about what's happening for 6 years now in Caledonia, in a country like Canada. It gives me great concern when I hear stories about people having to show passports to get into their own middle-class neighborhoods. It concerns me when I hear people express complaints that we didn't have equal treatment under the law. That's a concern as a neighboring MPP and leader of the province of Ontario. And I wanted to talk to people directly who have been impacted by that last 6 years to say, we need to move on.
It's been 6 years of relative peace, though, and this is such a complex issue.
Yes. Have you gone to have one of these backyard talks in Oswego?
No.
Why not?
Well, listen, I'm prepared to talk to anybody through Toby's office about the issues, but I think, no matter where you live, come on, no matter where you live, You believe in that Canadian principle about equal treatment of law. So who do I want to talk to today? Folks in the neighborhood and people whose backyards were turned into a war zone with the occupation that occurred in Caledonia.
Have you investigated our issues about the land claim?
So I'm
Our history?
Listen, I'm not here to weigh in on constitutional law and land claim issues. I'm here to stand up on an important principle that we need to move forward, and we should all be treated equally under the law, no matter where we come from.
The government that took our land.
We'll take a question from Youssef M. right here.
Mr. Hudak, recently, Mr. Toby Barrett has said that there is no claim on the DCE land. What are your remarks there?
Well, I think Toby is saying exactly what the federal government has said with respect to the Douglas Creek's estates property, particularly. But listen, there will be all kinds of debates forever, as there has been for some time now, about land claims. But I'm talking about some stability, some peacefulness in the area, and a chance for more jobs to be created and to happen here. And I think the Premier plays a role in that. So in order to do that, if you could let me finish, in order to do that, the Premier needs to say this is wrong. And the Premier needs to say that he believes that the laws in Ontario should be enforced. Until we hear that, I'm afraid we're going to paralyze the law.
Should Commissioner Lewis be fired?
Isn't your word for
talking
stealing the
about,
land expropriated?
You're talking about
Commissioner Lewis be fired?
Folks, in order to keep as best I can for Toby and I, we did invite members of the media to be here. I'm glad to take any questions.
Okay, are you aware, sir, of how many people have been arrested from Six Nations for incidents like the ones that you opened your comment with?
Yes.
Rather than saying that these people are getting away with blue bloody murder, so to speak. Do you know how many Six Nations people have been to court for alleged misconduct? And what misconduct has happened in the past 4 years here?
Well, listen,
You're talking 6 years of this. What misconducts and what violence has taken place in the last 4 years?
Well, I mean, six years of this is long enough. It's far too long. And I'm just repeating what I've heard from residents here in the Caledonia who express a concern about.
Yes, but this man here asked you a good
question.
This man here asked you a good question. Do you know how many have been arrested?
You know what?
Because there have been more than 100 arrested at all the incidents over the last 6 years.
Well, here's the issue. I mean, and folks in the crowd can have debates among themselves about the number of people who've been arrested. I'm hearing
the way you put it out there, sir, is like nobody's been arrested. That these people have gotten away with everything.
Respectfully, you can ask me a question, I can answer. You can.
How many
Mr. Hudak,
I'm glad
Mr.
to.
Hudak, have you ever read Christy Blatchford's book Helpless?
I've read excerpts of it. I have it, and I wanted to get through it. And this is a
do you
concern.
have a copy of the book?
I do have a copy.
You
of
do
it.
have a copy.
Oh
of
yeah, I
it.
do.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a copy of the latest book called Caledonia Conflict?
And again, I don't
written
know
by
if
Laura
people
DeVries?
You know, I think people through the media, I don't know if they're concerned about books in my library. I think they want to know where I stand.
Should Commissioner Lewis be fired?
And here's where I stand.
Practical question.
You know,
should Commissioner Lewis
Harry,
be
he's
fired?
taking questions
You know,
from the
again,
media
I'll
right
take
now.
questions.
Should Commissioner Lewis be fired?
I'll take questions
Sir, is there any?
from
Can
the
I ask?
media.
I am from the media. Commissioner Lewis be fired?
Actually,
so
there's
is
been
he.
there's been about 3 or 4 questions here. And
I
I'm
guess
trying.
the media knows.
And I'm trying to.
There will be time after.
Mr. Hudak.
And I try, let me respond to the some of the questions, and I know there's the shouting over my shoulder. Listen, I don't think the issue. You know, I don't know where the issue lies, and that's with the lack of leadership from the Premier of the Province of Ontario. People can cast aspersions on the OPP. I am concerned about frontline officers here who probably rightfully don't believe the Premier of the Province of Ontario believes that the law should be enforced in the Province of Ontario. And when the laws aren't enforced in Ontario, you have now 6 years of this. I'm just saying, you know, enough is enough. It's time to move forward, and you need Premier McGuinty to say this is
So
wrong.
if the laws have been violated, sir, how many Six Nations people have been arrested?
Into the law. Yeah. Well, you could probably give me a better answer.
Yes, I could.
Than I could on the exact number of people. The concern I have, and maybe you disagree with me, the concern I have is that people have not seen equal treatment under the law. There's a concern that in Caledonia now for 6 years, and the law has been suspended. And again, I'm getting a couple questions.
What violence
from
has
media.
happened in the last 4 years?
I'm going to ask
from
the
the
same
media.
question until you answer it.
Well, I did.
Is Commissioner Lewis responsible for two-tier justice?
I believe that the problem here rests with the Premier of the Province of
So you
Ontario
believe that the
and
Premier
Government of Ontario.
dictates terms to the
So what
OPP?
do people
I
need
do.
to do to move forward?
I do have concern that the Premier has not given the right signals that he believes that the law should be applied equally to all.
Yeah.
Well, what would you do differently? What's the solution
We
then?
won't do anything different. What I think people should do, I think they should keep the pressure up on the Premier to do exactly what I'm doing. Come here in Caledonia to say that this 6 years of occupation is wrong and it's time to move forward.
What would you do?
But what's the solution, sir? What is
honest questions with honest answers?
We'll take a
Would
question
you
from
fire
98.9.
Commissioner Lewis?
Mr. Hudak? What would you do differently? What would the Tories do? How would we be in a different situation if you had been elected in the last election?
Well, we wouldn't have been in this hole because I think the challenge. Was that the Premier.
What would you do
No
different?
problem. I think that the
Never mind what he
the
did. What
Premier,
would you do
well,
different?
the question was asked to me, and I'm answering
I know, and
the
I asked it
question.
first.
Right? Here's the bottom line. The Premier of the province needs to give the signal to the frontline officers in this province that the expectation is that we enforce the law in the province of Ontario. We enforce it equally, and I'm very concerned that whether it was directly or indirectly, that Premier McGuinty sent the opposite signal, and now we're in a 6-year
Kick the
hole.
people off our
So
stolen
what
land then.
would I do?
We're not
I would
Canadian.
make sure that our frontline police officers know that they have a Premier, Tim Hudak, who believes that we should ensure that the laws are enforced in Ontario equally, no matter where he comes from. It's a fundamental Canadian principle that I believe, and I believe the vast majority of Ontarians believe in.
And so how many
And
arrests have
secondly-
been made?
And secondly, I just I don't believe you reward behavior that's prolonging this crisis in Caledonia. I just don't. I think a lot of people are going to wonder why the province of Ontario continues to pay hydro bills and water bills to the last beaten up house standing on Douglas Creek Estates. Like, how is that helping resolve the situation? I don't understand why the Premier of the province of Ontario is forcing taxpayers to pay those bills for that house on Douglas Creek Estates. I think
What do you think of the
wrong
Samsung
thing.
deal?
I think it's a
Samsung
rip-off.
deal with Six Nations.
I think it's a rip-off to taxpayers.
so?
He's going to drive up our hydro bills. It's going to cost us jobs. I'm very clear about that.
All right, guys, last question from the media, please.
Now, do you try to pressure the McGuinty government into working with the federal government to resolve the land claims that are outstanding? They both have seats at the table. Just because it seems to be the federal government supposed to take the lead, they both have seats at the table. There is a Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs. They do have some responsibility for implementing whatever kind of settlement may be reached, and they sit there. So do you apply that kind of pressure that you are for this?
Well, listen,
this issue?
I think there's two important issues here that you discuss. First, when it comes to land claims, there'll be land claims history in Canada take a long time, and
200
hopefully
years
they'll
so
be.
far.
There you go. So it's been 200 years of debate. I get from a member of the media here. So, is it important that we resolve land claims in Canada? Of course it is, right? The government should work that way. But secondly, let's not let that interfere with what we've seen now for 6 years here in Caledonia. Separate from land claims, I think it's the duty of the Premier of the province of Ontario
What have we
to
seen
say
here
that
for
he
6
supports frontline police officers to do their job
What have we
enforcing
seen in
Why is
the
that
laws
separate?
in Ontario. And secondly, don't do things that are going to prolong the 6-year occupation, including paying the hydro bills for the last rundown house sitting on the set. That's wrong. I mean, how can we continue to pay the hydro bills, and how does that solve the situation in Caledonia?
All right, thanks, folks.
Running into the house.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
No, I thought you said he was going to answer questions from residents and people.
He's going to walk.